The power fantasy is one that has been around as long as we've been telling stories. From ancient Greek epics to modern day cinema, and of course, never more so than in video games. In fact, it's quite rare that we see games that don't seek to make the player feel powerful in some way, and when we do, it's usually trying to scare the crap out of them instead. And then there are these games that are trying to evoke other kinds of feelings. Games like Papers, Please, or Getting Over It with Bennett Foddy. Games that are comfortably indie by cultural definition and are expected to be somewhat outside the box. You would never expect to see this kind of theming in AAA titles, and most certainly not in the heroic power fantasy franchise, The Legend of Zelda. But then the year 2000 rolled around, and in the year leading up to the 27th of the new millennium, some designers at Nintendo made a bet with higher-ups that if they could make a wholly new Zelda game to follow up the smash hit Ocarina of Time, then they wouldn't have to work on an expansion for Ocarina. Now, being without the preparation that typically goes into a blockbuster Nintendo title, the team was backed into a much more restrictive place that bred exceptional creativity. There was no time to come up with something that had minimal risk. The team was often forced to just roll with where the project wanted to take them. The result was a unicorn. Something that shouldn't exist, standing right before us. A dark, disturbed game, made not only by Nintendo of all developers, but in one of their crown jewel series of games. Where Ocarina of Time is the definition of heroic and epic, The Legend of Zelda Majora's Mask is a game in which characters are trying to reconcile annihilation via poisonous swamps, unending winter, and a demonic moon crashing into the earth. It's despair, the feeling that there's no hope left and you're doomed, spread across a whole world in a multitude of ways. And this isn't just the story of the game, as is often the case in this medium. The mechanics of the game are such that despair is thrust upon the audience via play. The player has 72 fast hours to stop the impact of the moon, coincidentally scheduled to crash the eve of the town's festival, celebrating the giants that the player has to rescue from 4 respective dungeons in order to prevent all this moon business from happening. At any point in time, the player can save their file and return to the start of the first day, resetting all their progress with the exception of retaining almost all key items. Everything else, however, is lost. All the people you were in the middle of helping, all the reunited couples and families, all the Goron saved from chili bummitis, undone. Everyone goes back to being miserable, and the only thing to remember them by is the material reward for having helped them. James B. Duke Professor of Psychology and Behavioral Economics at Duke University Dan Ariely describes in his October 2012 TED Talk, link in the down there part, what it is about the work that we do that makes us feel good. In an experiment, Ariely would pay people $3 to build Legos. After they would finish, he would ask them if they would like to build another for 30 cents less, then again and again, until they stopped. This demonstrated that, even though they were playing with Legos, which is objectively the most fun thing that a person can do on Earth, that eventually the reward would get to a point so low and the work so repetitive that they would no longer want to do the work. Now, what was most interesting to me about this experiment is that the process could be sped up by a number of demotivating factors. One of the most potent of which was that after handing the subjects the second Lego set, Ariely's experimenters would deconstruct the one that they had just built before their eyes, and instead of offering them a third Lego set to build, they would offer them the first again. This dramatically decreased the number of times that they would want to take up the opportunity to be a professional Lego builder. This and many other experiments cited in his work led Ariely to believe that what people value most in their work is that it is recognized by others, and that one of the best ways to demotivate a person is to disallow them to put that work on display. There's real anguish to reaching the end of the third day in Majora's Mask. Like, I'm super happy that I saved the Deku Princess, and that the king doesn't have to boil the monkey alive, but great. Have fun with the last day of your life before the world gets completely apocalypsed. Or like when you're doing a dungeon on a fresh cycle, and you know it's time for the old lady to be robbed in North Clocktown, but you can't be everywhere at once. Fuck me! Everything you do is tirelessly futile unless you see your actions as means to ends, which maybe you do for the few mercies that you tackle early on. You know, you learn to look for Cafe from Madame Aroma once, and it doesn't really make a huge difference that she knows that you're looking for him in any following timelines. Or you don't teach the Rosa sisters Chimera's dance one time because, frankly, you have more important priorities, and yeah, you can live with that. And maybe over time you get a bit numb to some of the more upsetting things, like, yeah, it's awful that you never saved Kome from the forest, but hey, the world's gonna end in 3 days anyways, and you're gonna go back in time, so there's always next time. She has to wait. But eventually, you'll finish a long, arduous dungeon with all the puzzles and boss fights, and you even got all those fairies to redeem for a doubled magic meter, and you head on down to see how you fixed everyone's problems, and you realize that there's like only 7 in-game hours left before you're gonna have to go back in time to where you didn't do any of that, and nobody recognizes your efforts. But hey, you got a mask, and that fairy upgrade, remember that? That's enough, right? Oh wait, did I mention the mask? Oh, I did? Huh. This is far from a complaint though. All of this is Majora's Mask meeting its aesthetic goals masterfully. You can't always give your help to everyone who needs it. It's brutal and disheartening and thankless. But so is much of life, and sometimes, unfortunately, the only way out is through. It's a theme that's truer to life than any fantasy of bold adventure or heroic jaunt through a magical kingdom could ever be. It's reconciliation with destruction. It's grief. Majora's Mask is my favorite game of all time, and has been for years, even on repeat playthroughs and after long stretches of being away from it. So thank you for joining me in this analysis of Clocktown, an outstanding hub for many reasons, but perhaps most especially is how it reinforces the themes of the game, familiarizes the player with its layout, and instills the terror of a world about to end in the player so quickly. How do you make someone who has the ability to turn back time fear impending doom? Majora's Mask does it like this. When Link first arrives in the land of Termina, he is robbed and cursed by a Skull Kid bearing Majora's Mask, being trapped in the form of a Deku, this plant, person, thing. He is then met by a traveling mask salesman, and I've never personally met a traveling mask salesman, but if I did, I would expect them to at least look this creepy. Anyway, he says that if Link can retrieve Majora's Mask as well as his own stolen ocarina, then the salesman will teach Link how to undo the curse with the magical instrument. This ocarina is the means by which the player resets time, and if it hasn't dawned upon you already, this means that until you steal back this ocarina, this game isn't about repeating the last 3 days before Armageddon. It's just Armageddon. It's coming for you, and you've got to figure out how to stop it soon. Suffice it to say, you're gonna have a busy 3 days. In that time frame, the player will mend a great fairy, play hide-and-seek all over town, journey below the city, visit an observatory, and trade a space rock for a big-ass flower that still won't shelter you from the giant angry space rock, but hey, it's pretty. This is some stressful shit, in no short part due to the lack of meaningful direction from the game itself. Tattle provides some hints here and there, but they're more like nudges. You still have to locate the stray fairy, you still gotta find those kids on your own, and you still gotta find out what to do with that moon sphere. Perhaps most importantly is that you have to wait until the end of the 3rd day to finally retrieve your ocarina, which is cutting it scary close, I'll have you know, but miraculously not tedious. There's a lot of discovery present in Clocktown from the very beginning. The town is populated with a bunch of colorful weirdos ready to get their party on, and people correctly predicting the end of the world in panic to interact with and learn about. You have time to learn about the performance troupe in town, and the missing son of the mayor. You'll go to every part of town, and find that the clock tower is in the south, the park is in the north, shops are in the west, and most other attractions are in the east. You'll lose money on the lottery, and find out that you can't enter the milk bar so that you can drink to forget, and then blow the rest of the money on the treasure chest game, because fuck it, the world's ending, and I have no idea how to stop it. I'm just a scrub! Or maybe you won't do half that, and you'll play the Deku Scrub game, or witness a mugging. The world's your oyster, really. Most importantly, nothing about this intro tells you that you're going to be able to go back in time and do it again. For all you know, this is it. This is the whole game, and you have one shot at this. This is something that few people get to experience with Majora's Mask in present day, but it's not that obvious that this is a time travel game to someone playing this for the first time in the year 2000, let alone a kid. So, to answer that question posed at the beginning of this section, how do you make someone who has the ability to turn back time fear impending doom? You traumatize them a little. Once the player has returned to the start of the first day with their trusty ocarina, and has been returned to their Hylian form, some interesting questions are sure to arise. Did everything I do get undone? Can I do them again? What can I do now that I'm not a Deku? They might even remember that the bombers said that only humans... Terminians? Hylians? are allowed in their gang. Playing hide and seek with them again bestows the most important item in all of Majora's Mask on the player, the Bomber's Notebook. The notebook contains a timeline of the 3 days, and 19 slots for various people in and around Clocktown who need help. That help ranges from listening to a senile grandma tell you stories, to saving a farm's livestock from being abducted by creepy aliens, and then keeping their milk safe from bandits while it's delivered. And then there's the weird shit, like finding makeshift butt wipe for a guy who lives in a toilet, or forcing several chicks to explode into roosters. Or aiding the spirit of a man and passing on the only way he knows how, which is, of course, through interpretive dance. These quests are bizarre and dark and wholesome, mostly. Probably not the turlet hand one, but never normal. They're all just a part of this fever dream experience that's both filled with typical Zelda whimsy and a dash of, fuck it, the world is ending, nothing makes sense. More than just lending to them being charming misfits, these characters are humanized by these flaws, which, if you know anything about writing, is what makes characters endearing. More endearing than anything else in Zelda, at any rate. And you get to know them quite intimately. Gorman leaves the Stockpot Inn to visit Madame Aroma at the mayor's house at 9:10 on the first day, and arrives at his destination at 10 a.m. on the dot. He speaks to the receptionist at 10:10, then proceeds to enter Madame Aroma's room. He speaks with her, then leaves disheartened for the milk bar and sulks there until 10 p.m. At this time, Barton starts serving bevs, and Gorman ends up drinking his sorrows away until 6 a.m. the next morning. This happens every cycle without missing a beat. You learn these characters through a matter of repetition, repetition, repetition. Not only does this allow the player to plan their 3 days around where everyone will be at a given time, but it also speaks volumes to what type of person each of them are. Guru is an eccentric loner with a weight on his conscience from his secret past. Anju feels pressure to please her mother, but is willing to go behind her back to locate her missing love. Mommy from the bomb shop is a risk-taker, willing to make trips to her distributor in the dead of night. Like I said, they're a bunch of freaks and weirdos, but they're my freaks and weirdos, and I love them, and I want to help each and every one of them. But I can't. Their schedules are designed to conflict with one another. And even beyond the confines of the hub, things change once the dungeon's boss is cleared, such as the Zora band getting back together and Spring returning to Snowhead Mountain. There just isn't enough time to do absolutely everything that needs to be done in this world before the player has to turn back the clock and make all their hard work go away. Again, this reinforces themes of despair, but it also reinforces another theme that intertwines with and modifies all this grief to reveal what Majora's Mask is really about. And that theme is the power of friendship. It's pretty self-evident from the get-go. Link is looking for his friend Navi before winding up in Termina. The fairies Tattle and Tail have their friendship with the Skull Kid strained since he stole Majora's Mask. The Skull Kid causing all this trouble is the one from Ocarina of Time to whom Link taught Saria's song, forming their own friendship. And later on into the game it is made clear that the 4 giants imprisoned by Skull Kid have a tumultuous friendship since thought to be past. While your deeds are ultimately unremembered, Majora's Mask does a good job of honoring your work in a few different kind of ways. The first and most obvious is that very often the reward persists through time travel and is noted in your notebook as a memento of your labor. And the other is that while it doesn't last, the people that you help are always very outwardly grateful for what you did to help them. They do recognize it in the moment. Some of these sequences are so much more cathartic than could ever be thought to be possible from a game with like 10 polygons total in it. Link's elbows are as sharp as his sword. So earlier when I said that the aesthetic goal of the game was to invoke grief, I was only half telling the truth. The thesis of Majora's Mask takes a long time to reveal itself because playing its hand this way reinforces the point that it's making. After the player has rescued all 4 giants, they can call them when they face off against Skull Kid at the end of the 3rd day, just before the moon will fall. As a twist, Majora's Mask itself reveals that Skull Kid was nothing more than a puppet for many nights with the moon and begins to forge Termina. Link makes it clear that he's gonna follow the mask inside of the moon, and both Tattle and Tail follow, wanting to help both of their friends. So just like in real life, it turns out that inside the moon is a big open field with a central hill atop which a tree stands. So from here on out, the player can just challenge the final boss at their own discretion, and it's a pretty challenging fight. It has 3 forms, requires you to use various items, and makes good use of a mask transformation. Alternatively, prior to the final boss, the player can play a series of minigames in order to unlock a 4th transformation via the Fierce Deity's Mask. And it is stupid Stupidly overpowered. This one item turns the final boss, all 3 of its forms, into a complete curb stomp, tearing Majora in two as if it were a damp tissue. The catch is that the only way to play these minigames is to trade every single mask in the game away outside of the 3 main transformation ones. Okay, so here's the part of the video where my digression about friendship and themes and the end of the game finally makes its way back to hub design. Huh? Pretty clever. How do you get most of these masks? By helping people in and around the hub of Clocktown. You see, doing all these good deeds for strangers, making friends with them, if only for a short while, is largely thankless. At first. Despair and doom, depressing circumstances, and the weight of the world are things to contend with up until this point in the game, but here we have a complete reversal. So, just what is it that The Legend of Zelda Majora's Mask is trying to say with all of this? That even when it seems like it's accomplishing nothing in the grand scheme of things, being the best person that you can be to an utter stranger just might make the world a better place. That the only time that something is completely without hope is when we no longer wish to hope. And it can be hard. It can be utterly grueling at times to wake up each day with hope towards what such a seemingly doomed future might hold, but the only way that we lose is when we choose to no longer show humanity to others. By carefully designing the world, and most especially the space that you spend so much of the game in, for reprieve, for goofing off, to meet some characters with character, Majora's Mask expertly weaves a narrative of helping flawed people with no pretense of material gain into an ultimate reward that punctuates it so hard that I reel every time that I pop in the cartridge. And after all is said and done, everyone forgives Skull Kid. Link, the Giants, Tattle, and Tail, they all give him another chance. They never stopped believing that he could be a good person, even when he was literally going to smush the world with a big angry rock out of rage. You see, a long time ago, the Skull Kid and the Giants were friends, but the Skull Kid was a jerk, who would play jokes on the people of the world until the Giants tried to hold him accountable and sent him away. When he got his power from Majora's Mask, he decided to take revenge, seal the Giants away, and destroy the world that they loved so much. By acting in a way that took people's feelings for granted, Skull Kid was treated so in kind, and he doubled down on his feelings, believing that the world was out to get him, and so he might as well jerk people around and destroy anyone in his way. The Skull Kid lacked faith in humanity. The whole game, he is the antithesis of everything the game believes that we should be, and it almost ended the world. Whew boy, that was a lot. The rest of the video is going to be a lot more mechanically based. The hub of Majora's Mask is, in fact, dual in nature. As we saw, Clocktown serves as the thematic center point of the game, creating a backbone for the narrative of the experience. The second portion of the hub is Termina Field, providing a mechanical backbone in many ways. If Clocktown is the meat of the world, then Termina is the level select. As a geographical center, Termina Field facilitates a logical connection between the Southern Swamp, Snowhead Mountains, the Great Bay, Ikana Canyon, and Clocktown. The circular design means that players will seldom get lost, and the obvious visual designs of the staging area for each of the separate locations spell as clearly as possible what to expect when you take that path. There are a lot of specific memorable touches of detail, too. The mushroom rocks before Snowhead, the hollow log at the entrance to the swamp, the pillars at the mouth of the Ikana Canyon. Furthermore, the changes in fauna are a nice bit of polish. Whether it's the levers in the sand leading up to the bay, the dodongos at the base of Snowhead, the blue bubbles at night throughout the field, or... Termina Field is one of the most convincing overworlds in all of Zelda. You can hardly go a few steps without finding something visually or mechanically interesting, not to mention all the little secrets that reward returning with the new items and masks. A small aside, but even considering how fun it is to move as Goron Link, Termina Field's layout leans into that extra hard, with very little getting in the way of you tearing up everything like a madman. You know, sometimes it's the simple pleasures in life that make all the difference. I only have one complaint that could be considered criticism of this hub, and it's not even something that they do, it's something that they don't not do. Let me explain. In Ikana Canyon, there's this river that serves as a barricade to the upper ghost town. Now, if the player jumps in and then goes with the flow all the way down to the end, entering this cavern here, they'll come out here, in the Great Swamp. It's really unexpected and makes the world click further into place. Any guesses how many times this happens in Majora's Mask? I'll give you a second. Did you say once? Because it's once. Right here, in the final zone of the game. Maybe it's that each level is so thematically isolated and that they're all complete packages, that the warping in this game doesn't bother me as it did in Dark Souls. They're both geographical centers, but where Dark Souls also had this world design that felt ruined by the Lord Vessel warp, Termina's areas are just such tightly designed morsels that they don't need Clocktown to prop them up. It's all just good stuff, and you can enjoy them independently, which, to be clear, I think is a good thing, and doesn't detract from Clocktown as an amazing hub. The 4 regions surrounding Termina are these wonderful self-contained environments with unique characters, stories, and each of them designed to get the most out of the forms that Link can turn into, respectively. And it could be that these more isolated designs help drive that home, but this one secret passage makes me feel like it was a missed opportunity over this otherwise extremely well-realized world. To have their overarching stories more directly interact with the goings-on of Clocktown. Perhaps it could be viewed as a twisted compliment, that when so much of this game works so goddamn well, that stuff like this stands out all the more. Whenever I play Majora's Mask, I find myself amazed at how well crafted everything still feels, and it's really hard to figure out if I've managed to distance myself from my nostalgia or not when I make that judgment call. Whatever it might be, I think it's undeniable that it is incredible that a Zelda game on the Nintendo 64 of all things managed to be what Majora's Mask is. It's this big, weird, charmingly disturbed puzzle that all comes together to make the bigger picture. It's possibly my ideal video game, and for my purposes, that's all I really need to know. Clocktown is my favorite hub in my favorite game of all time, and I cannot wait to see more worlds inspired by this outstanding design. God, that was a big one. Thanks for sitting through it all. Make sure to like, comment, subscribe, and hit the notification bell to help me grow my channel. My Twitter is linked below if you want to hear my drastically less refined thoughts on things. As well as my Patreon if you want to throw money at me. It's weird to be done making a video about my favorite game, you know, and it feels like you'll never do it justice, and I really hope that I have. I was able to dedicate so much time to this thanks to my patrons who are scrolling past right now. They help me grow closer to doing this full-time sustainably. And you could too. Besides being featured in my credits, patrons get access to my workflow and videos early, not to mention my hilarious blooper reels. Top tier supporters get to vote on what subjects I cover next. In fact, the first poll ever is going up after this video launches. They also get special recognition like this. Thanks to Absol Wednesday, Andrew Lumert, Brad Goodrich, Leela the Final, Nikolai Carpathia, and Three-Eyed P. Can't wait to see you all next time. Cheers!